Yep, it's time to stand back up. Everybody stand for our pledge and moment of silence, please. The flag is actually
Right in the corner?
right here in the corner.
Okay.
We'll protect.
Right?
I believe you.
Attention, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Pause for a moment of silence, please. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for noting the Executive Order 72 postings and abiding with those. We welcome you to our monthly meeting. We are here to accomplish the business of schools for the sake of our students. We do want to hear from our citizens, and there's time for public comment prior to action items on the agenda. We ask that speakers identify themselves and their district. We also ask that your comments are limited to 3 minutes in order to provide equity to all speakers and to ensure our meeting is reasonable and late. If you have more information that can be summarized in 3 minutes, please provide leave-behind materials for the board's review. The moderator will ask you to conclude your remarks as time has elapsed. If you have questions during the session, you may ask for clarification from your school board member or a school administrator after the meeting's adjourned. Thank you for coming. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda for this evening?
So moved.
A motion from Ms. Bynum. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Grove. Any comments? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. So ordered. Is our student liaison here? Yes, come. Okay, so. Hey, would you introduce yourself, everybody? It's great for them to get to know you.
It's good.
How much these virtual days in general have affected students and their studies? I'd like to briefly read just a few quotes that verify some information from the article from the Ground Truth Project, which was written by Ms.
Wonder if the battery's dying or something.
Extras just in case.
That was written by Ms. Rachel Meeker in December of 2020. And she interviewed Ms. Lydia Schuler.
Yeah, it works.
Timeout. Okay.
To back on that, I would like to read a few quotes from this article that was written, which was written by Mr. Toledo in December 2020. And she interviewed Ms. Olivia Schumann, who's a Rappahannock senior, and the rest of her family about the struggles that they've been facing. In this article, Olivia says, I'm basically teaching myself. She reports that teachers don't have enough time to teach her, so she's only in school 2 days, in person, if what thereabouts. And that for the most part, she's just getting assignments done for the sake of getting them done. She's not really enjoying it at all, which is very sad. And then Olivia also reports that I've always gotten straight A's all throughout elementary school and all throughout high school, and this year she has B's and C's. I would say I'm struggling. Her mother mentioned in the article that she's been a straight A student forever, and this year the way things are, the way she's having to keep things, her grades have slipped, and her grades continue to slip. Olivia also told her mother that she felt concerned about finding college and she didn't want to send them her grades to this. This story in this article is just another version of the struggles that each and every student that Coffee has gone through. And for an outsider looking in, a straight A student in Rappahannock might not be a positive one, but for that student that needs help, it is a great matter for them and adds a lot of additional unnecessary stress and anxiety. It's vital that these students get help. Presently, the high school has a district tutoring program. However, when we know that this tutoring is only available for students who require remediation, which includes students that are either close to or are already failing classes. As a student, I'm very happy that this is an option. However, I think that limiting this to a few select students may not be the greatest interest of our student body. I understand that resources for such tutoring may be limited, but if possible, I think it would be beneficial if we have considered tutoring all students as a employment for my life. If this isn't possible, then maybe teachers can have specific hours and Wednesdays in which they could devote their full attention and time to helping students in person with homework or with understanding course concepts. If teachers can't be in the building on Wednesdays, then they could also offer set times for them to be available by phone, either forwarding their school's extensions or setting up for Google phone numbers, so as not to get off the personal knowledge of students. Currently, most communication during non-in-person school days are by email. This is a very ineffective method, which can go back and forth for several hours to explain one question or one concept. Some teachers also currently offer Zoom meetings, but we live in Rappahannock, and not everyone has the internet capacity to do Zoom meetings, especially if they have multiple siblings who have to be using it all at the same time. Now, I'm not saying that these are the only ways, that these are the best ways, but I do think it's important to bring these concerns to the forefront when there's still time this semester to fix it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for our student liaison, anybody?
I was just, we've been hearing about the Wednesday option for students to come in, and I don't know if you have a perspective on that for high school students. That's my understanding that Wednesday school has been available. For tutoring, yeah, that's what we've heard about, and I was just curious if you know anybody, or if that's been something that's...
I don't know if anybody who's been part of the tutoring, but I have tried to do that myself.
Okay.
It wasn't even difficult because I'm not in the
Okay.
Yeah, any student that is having any difficulty and wants to meet with the teacher, if you have any struggles with that, definitely speak to your administration, your principal about that, because it is available. We have other tutors in place too, and if we need to build capacity, we can. The only thing we ask is we need to know who is coming to be able to provide transportation. So that's the key piece. So absolutely let us know, and we will make sure that you get the help you need. And also we're looking at after-school tutoring options coming up soon. for those who may need that. So hang in there, but always keep talking to us, okay?
It's good to remind your fellow students to how to communicate and get the response that they need, so they don't feel like they're just in a rowboat with no oars, right?
It's been a lot for everyone, just having
Right,
emails is lovely, but sometimes your teachers can't get through.
right. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Raphael.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. All right. I guess the next thing is this,
Yes, it is.
isn't it?
It is.
Okay, are you going to do this?
Do you want us to do this, or do you want to
I
do
think maybe I
it?
should do this.
Excellent.
Yeah, how are we going to do it? Because we're way up here.
Yeah, all right, well, get ready to catch. No. So we have a special recognition this evening. There are a couple individuals on staff who do so much behind the scenes and wear many, many, many hats, and we're just so thankful for them. So we would like to recognize Courtney Atkins and Robin Murray, our school nurses and AD and COVID team leaders and contact tracers and whatever else to keep us healthy and safe for all the work that they've been doing. It is constant, and I know we're on the phone quite a bit on weekends and breaks and nights. So I'm sorry for that, but we appreciate your dedication, and then never once do they say, okay, we need someone else to take this on. No, they're right there and help us out. So we have a special recognition for you.
Robin and Courtney, could you guys come up here, come through the door and come up? Over there, that door. So I need to know, if you could see, I got a chance to take a look at Courtney's tracing matrix, the spreadsheets that are used. Do you want to come through?
Sure. I'm not all that.
And so it's a complex thing to figure out who touched who, and to keep it all in a spreadsheet and to keep a history of how that's maturing or how it's becoming extinct. And then 2 weeks ago, I became one of Courtney's problems, right? I was exposed to somebody who was positive, and now she's receiving emails and phone calls from me because I'm like, what do I do? When do I come back? When I can't come back? And so any little question, here's the thing, my little experience, and I don't interface with all the staff and students, but I was a pain in her neck. But just a very short period of time. And so I know that when she's tracking like the wrestling team, that it's multiplied by, a magnitude of 10. So it's a lot of work that probably neither one of these ladies really signed up for, but they're doing an exemplary job. And the board wanted to do something special. So I'm not sure of everything that's in here because Dr. Grimsley's been up to something too. So this evening we'll present you with a token of thanks from the board and so probably a picture too. Yeah. And we don't shake hands anymore, so we do this, right? Thank you very much. Nobody will recognize in 10 years because we all have masks. Right?
Thank you.
So all I need to do is fall off the stage at my hearing. One more thing to mention during special recognition, as Cassia brought up the athletic trainer in Madison, who saved our coach's life, literally. I thought it might be good to honor her at the next board meeting, to hopefully draft something up for her and see if she can come out.
That'd be
and her
great.
name is, hold on, I wrote it down.
It's
Catherine Krauthamel.
Right.
So if we could maybe get her to come out.
Yeah, so Cassie gave you a little, were you there, Cassie? You were at the event? That's amazing. So,
Yeah, my son was
and so
there.
here we are a week removed from it, and I think your
my
son's
son was
right
there, yeah.
But here's a lady that had the right skills and the right equipment at the right time and acted correctly and saved our coach's life. and so remarkable. I saw Madison had given her Employee of the Month status, and they also noted that in the future, people don't have to save people's lives in order to become employees of the month. I thought that was pretty well done. And
Pretty high bar.
it's pretty high bar to do. Yeah, but certainly, you know, a lady of action that acted by her training promptly. Yeah, very much appreciated.
Yes.
Good, thank you, Dr. Grinsley. So, moving on, donations, Madam Clerk.
We do not have any donations, but I left it on the agenda.
Okay, all right, thanks. Is there a motion to adopt the minutes from February 9th?
So moved.
We have a motion from Mr. Grove. Is there a second?
Second?
Second from Ms. Bynum. Is there any comments? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, no. So ordered. Mr. Grove, was there any comment on the bills?
I did review all the bills and everything looks pretty good. We have a number that are in just the 70% racket, so that's good.
At this time of the year, yeah.
Yeah.
Good job. All right, is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
So moved.
We have a motion from Ms. Bynum. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Grove. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, no. And so ordered. Madam Superintendent.
Yes, sir. The first item under my reports is the hiring process. At the last meeting, it was brought up, I believe Ms. Bynum brought up that it might be a good thing just to kind of go through what our process is but through the HR department. So I've asked Dr. Carol Johnson to come and present about that process.
Can everybody in the audience hear fairly well? Good?
Can-
Okay, good.
You might want to pull that thing a little closer to you.
Okay.
There you go.
You have to turn it. Hit it. There it goes.
Good evening.
That's it?
Yeah, you got it.
Keep it close.
Thank you so much for inviting me to talk about the hiring process.
You good?
It's a very good exercise, especially for this time of year because we're getting ready to move into recruiting season. So this is a great opportunity for me to kind of review the process as well. So our goal is looking for making sure that we have equality in our policy and our principles. And that we're providing equity in opportunities and equity in the process. So, always like to ground everything in school board policy. So, school board policy GB addresses our commitment to non-discrimination, identifying the protected classes as we move through the hiring process, and then most importantly, the last sentence, where personnel decisions are based on merit and the ability to perform the essential functions of the job with or without reasonable accommodation. So that kind of guides us as we move through the process. We also have school board policy GBN, which kind of outlines the school board's desire and intent with recruiting that has been designated to the role of the superintendent, who passes it on to the HR department. Typically, we are going to fill positions by advertising them so that all interested and qualified parties have an opportunity to apply. There are situations where we may veer from that process based on special circumstances with different employees, but typically that is the process we're going to use when we're hiring. Again, moving to the last two sentences are very important. Current division employees are given an opportunity to apply for the position if they are qualified, they're not automatically guaranteed that position. And then the applicant determined to be the best qualified shall be selected for a position regardless of whether they're internal or external. So we like to be able to help our internal applicants when they're interested in the position, but overall with the merit of the candidate is going to help the position as a whole. But only one last little piece of school board policy GCCD. And this is especially important for our small community because so many of us are related to each other. And so the policy has changed over the course of the years as to how the school board can end up hiring someone who may be related to a school board member. And at this point in time, the board member certifies that they are not involved with the hiring process. The superintendent also certifies to the board that their recommendation is based on the merit and the fitness of the candidate, along with the competitive rating of the qualifications, and that no member of the board had any involvement with the hiring decision. So just want to point that out. Like I said, we're so small, many of us are related. I personally have been a part of this policy over the course of the years that I've been here, and I'm actually glad to see that it's lightened up some because it does help us to be able to fill positions in our small area. So we began, of course, by advertising. We have a website where we post all the positions. We currently rented the space with the Rappahannock reporter. We also utilize the Rappahannock News. Facebook has been a good way to get the message out there. Word of mouth is always a good way to contact future candidates. Recruiting fairs are going to be a bit challenging in this virtual environment. I've got one set up with Pennsylvania, the first recruiting fair. We have next, and it's quite a complicated process to get this set up, but that's been a good fair for us in the past, so we can jump into the virtual world and hopefully get some good candidates. And then we're also planning a PR campaign. I've been collaborating some with politicians on PR specialists, and we would really like to build on the successes that Rappahannock County has experienced this year during these trying times. We really want to get that information out there and showcase it so that people see what Rappahannock has to offer. So we're hoping to get that up on our HR webpage in the near future and do some blast outs through social media as well. So for the actual process, when we are hiring support staff, this would be substitutes, aides, cafeteria workers, drivers, and custodians. We always begin with the application, screening the application for the person's individual qualifications, what their job history has been, we look as to whether there have been any legal issues, and do check. We review the references in the beginning. I don't always call the references in the beginning because many times with us being a small local area, we might recognize the people who've been put down for references. If there is a question about the person, as far as their application, we might reach out to the references before we go any farther. Then we do set up an informal interview with the supervisor. If the supervisor feels that the candidate is qualified, we move forward with a reference check. Then we wait to see if the candidate follows up on the paperwork in a timely manner. That's usually a big indication of what they want an employee person will end up being. For instance, if they come in and fill out the job paperwork, probably not going to follow through on that. So, important also. And then, of course, we do a background check that goes through not only the fingerprints, the FBI, but also the child registry background check. All right, for teachers, the process is a little bit more complicated. Again, we begin with those applications, screening them to be sure that the candidate has the necessary qualifications for the job, that they are endorsed in the area, that they are applying for a teaching position. Again, checking job history, legal issues, references. If they're qualified, we'll contact the applicant for an interview. Then we set up an interview panel. That's usually done for principals' input, depending on the subject, the grade level, the type of teacher that we are looking for. We try to get people who are experts in that area to help us conduct the interviews. We then utilize a standard set of interview questions. We have interview questions that we use. We will send those out to the principal to be updated as we set up new candidates. The interview team will convene a confidentiality form signed by everyone on the panel to be sure that that information stays with the board during the interview. Then we conduct the interview, and once we are finished, the interviews will assign a score of 1 to 4 to rate the respondents' answers, and we will discuss as a team what are good answers, what answers could have been stronger. If we have multiple applicants for a position, we'll total the score and kind of rank order the candidates. We may also have candidates who are rated very close to each other. Look at who may be the best fit for the position based on their previous experiences, on what their future interests are. And then the principal will make the decision as to whether or not the person will be offered the position. And then we'll move into the reference check and the background check. Administrators, and this one takes 2 slides because this is quite the process. So at this point, we are doing stakeholder surveys since we are currently advertising for a principal. So we try to get input on the desired characteristics for the community, the teachers, staff, parents, even students who are looking for a future principal. We will screen the applications for their certifications for the job once again, and if qualified, we'll contact the applicant for an interview. Then we set up the interview panel with input from principals and describe to have representatives from all stakeholder groups. So that can be quite challenging. We have some pretty large teams. I'm trying to form a new team for the principal interviews now. I think we're up to 14, so that's a pretty quite good team. Then we meet with the interview team before we ever do any interviews. We specify the confidentiality forms. The results of the survey will be presented to the team. Then the team will take that survey information to develop a list of characteristics based on that input of what we're looking for in a principal, as well as anything that the group may feel could have been left out of that. Then we share sample interview questions that we've used in the past and work together to compile a common set of interview questions. As a team, we discuss the look-for answers to the questions. What kinds of answers are we looking for that are going to show the candidate has knowledge of that particular concept and whether it fits with what the then we will conduct the interviews. One thing that's kind of interesting because of the small size of our buildings, we like to ensure the privacy of our candidates so they're not like passing each other in the hallways and they're coming to interview. So we do think about that. We do score the questions, discuss the strengths and weaknesses in the interview. After all the interviews are complete, we rank the candidates. Then for administrators, we also have an administrator candidate characteristic checklist that we use. So that's kind of the second part of the process where we'll take the 5 or 6 candidates who rated the highest from the interviews. And we're going to view them through the lens of how do they possess the characteristics that you said you think that we were looking for or administrator. Then we will submit the top 2 candidates to the superintendent for a final interview, and then of course follow up with that reference check and that background check. Must-haves for all positions. I like to speak with at least one previous supervisor to have a reference for the candidate to learn about how their work was in the position. They have to have a completed background check through FBI and Child Abuse Registry before they can work along with students. All required trainings have to be completed for their position. For instance, some of our
transportation aides who work with special education students may need to have CPR, specialized training in transporting special needs students before we bring them on board. And then teachers have an assignment of a mentor, and we're also considering this for our administrative positions as well, especially when you have a new administrator coming in who may not have made an administrator, but maybe not to that role. It's good to have someone else to be able to do that first year. And that's all that I have. The recommendations are welcome to review this concept.
It's very thorough. Any questions?
Thank you.
Yeah, a little bit, if you don't mind, Carol. And maybe you said this and I didn't hear it correctly, but can you give us just an idea of the places that we attend normally for recruiting?
Normally, for recruiting,
This is a COVID year, so I know we don't do that this year.
normally we go to James Madison University, we've gone to UVA, we do PERP almost every year. We have gone to William and Mary. Quite honestly, we haven't gotten any candidates from UVA or JMU.
Okay. Okay.
We've kind of been weighing the value of some of those recruiters, but we like to go to those because, it's an opportunity for us to get our name.
Do we advertise through Southern Teachers?
We have not advertised through Southern Teachers.
We used to find a lot of people that way, so. I don't know whether it costs anything to advertise through them or not. It's a magazine that comes out quite often. And then in here, it says that the reference, at least one reference. My experience has been that we ask for 3 references.
Yeah, we get 3 references, at least one, one of those 3 has to be from a supervisor.
One of those 3 what?
One of the 3, 3 references are required. One of those 3 has to be from a previous employer. So we have to give me 3 references, but a lot of times people like to give 3 references that are their colleagues and their best friends in their last school that they worked at. I would talk to their previous supervisor along with at least 2 other people that they work with.
What happens when they say, well, I haven't told my employer I'm looking for a job? I mean, I always just said, you're our candidate, and I'm either going to talk to your current employer, or you're not my candidate.
And we've had people who have told us that. I've never actually gone through the process where I've gotten to that point where I had to, say, okay, but I think I would probably say that.
Okay.
No, when we have had one, I can recall one where they did ask that they had the ability to tell their supervisor first before we made the call, and of course
Makes
we would
sense.
honor that. Yeah. Yeah.
24 hours. And legal issues up there where it says legal issues, I assume that means background checks?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, and there's also a section in the job applications where they are supposed to tell us if they have had any legal issues in the past.
Okay, speeding ticket, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
Okay. But we only do background checks of people we're going to hire, is that correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Anything else?
So I just wanted to clarify, we were talking about the references. Do you do references after you have interviewed the individual or before, typically?
I usually do them after I
Yes.
interview, just because, to me, if they're not necessarily very strong candidate, for instance, if we have right now 10 applications for principal, and I can spend all the interview time calling references for people
Right.
who are not going to end up getting the job. Now, if I'm looking through the application and there are things that maybe necessarily don't make sense to me, for instance, in their job job history, how that plays out, or any gaps in their usual experience that they have. And they go ahead and do a reference check before inviting that person for an interview.
And then if someone sees this video and is interested in referring people to how to find job openings at Rappahannock schools, where should they look?
It's going to be on our HR page. There's a job vacancy posting there. I think Dr. Bensley was but you can always just refer a person directly to the school board office, and we're happy to walk them through the process as well. We can do that quite often.
I was just, I haven't looked at that page very recently, but I was just curious, can you just look around at the job openings, or do you need to be registered in the system before you can see what openings are available?
Right there.
Yeah, they're there. Okay, good, because that is a change. I remember seeing it, so you had to register before.
Click on high school
So that's
first, we'll have a
wonderful.
look at that one.
Yeah, there's an employment.
That's great to see. Thank you, Shannon, for sharing. Underemployment, okay. Yeah, so if someone wants to look at any of the job descriptions, they can just see it right there.
Yeah, and you do, I think this is SearchSoft, so you do have to log in to apply for it, but you can see the description, the
Okay.
attachments there, and you can see the listings. Yes.
Right, very thorough, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you very much. Okay, item 4.2 is an exciting announcement that Headwaters and RCPS are collaborating on. It's a Headwaters event, really, so I'll ask Gary Angel if you wanted to come to the mic to make this announcement. Here you go.
Thank you, Dr. Grimsley, and thank you for the opportunity to share this with you guys, and thank you for your support. I think you all know that Headwaters is technically the Rappahannock County Public School Foundation. Sometimes people forget that. Our entire purpose, from the time we were founded to tonight, is to support public education in this county. Now, through the years, we often get associated with scholarships, which is great, and grants to individual teachers, which is great, and helping with courtyards, which is great. But we sometimes, I'm not sure the county residents fully understand that our central purpose is to strengthen and support quality education, excellence, and enrichment for every student in our Rappahannock County Public Schools. That's a systemic charge. It's not just raising money for scholarships. It's not just helping individual teachers. That's the system. I've told you before, I've told anyone who listens to me, that in my view, the public school system is the single most important public institution in the county. Constitutional mandate, it comes with legislative mandates, it comes from a long traditional history that counties are responsible primarily for a couple of things, roads, of course, and another one very high on the list is public education. So we are here as an adjunct to the school board and the board of supervisors. Our number one strategic goal is to strengthen our supportive relationship with the Rappahannock County Public School System. In the last month, a number of individuals have contacted me at their own initiative saying, we're concerned. Every year we come to about this time of the year, and it seems no matter what we anticipate, that we're going to have a conversation, a hard conversation about how we use resources in this county for all sorts of things that need to be done for the public good. But how do we fund and continue to fund an increasingly excellent public school system? And is this the year that we finally stop just being reactive and trying to put a stamp on a one-year problem and get serious about investigating long-term solutions that will provide a stable, secure, adequate funding stream to the public schools of Rappahannock? Well, when people start asking that question, and you're the chairman of the Rappahannock County, Foundation for Public Education, it's hard to say it's really not my issue. So it's become my issue. And the first thing we're going to do and we've had a month basically to get up to speed on this, so. But we are going to start a series of 3 public conversations called Funding Our Future, Conversations about Funding Public Education in Rappahannock. The first one's going to happen next Thursday night, and then 2 weeks later there'll be a second one, and then 2 weeks later there'll be a third one. And the timing of these is not just coincidentally around the budget cycle. Our task, our goal is to see that as many people in Rappahannock begin to understand the real issues. That when you say LCI, they don't glaze. You say ADM, they don't look away. When you talk about income inequities, when you talk about funding strategies and matrices and all the rest of it, when you talk about legislation out of Richmond, like no harm, that people begin to understand this is critical. If we want a really good public school system, we're going to have to become better educated citizens. You can't just say, well, raise the taxes. That's not the answer for anybody. It's certainly not the answer for families with kids in school. So this is our first step. We're going to try a way of getting information to the public. We were really ready to roll until we realized that the governor's order restricts attendance at these kinds of public meetings to 25 people. We don't qualify for any of the exemptions for school board or for board of supervisors or churches or even some other things. So we are struggling right now to try and figure out how to make this as interactive and participatory as possible. We hope we can get it recorded so it's available. We hope we can Zoom it so people at least can tune in. Our goal, though, is to make it possible for people who are at home via Zoom to ask questions, have comments, whatever. So that's right now our next challenge. But there'll be these 3 meetings. I think you've gotten a notice already. The first one is going to be the ABCs of building the budget. And we already know that Dr. Grimsley and we believe Mr. Curry will help the public get a little better understanding of really what are the pieces from both sides that have to go into these budgets. The second one will be funding challenges. And that's going to look at those things we really don't have a lot of control over, principally the LCI. Now, we may be able to get a little traction on how the 50% real estate is computed. We probably can't do anything about income, and we can't do anything at all about sales taxes. But if we could move some of the numbers that we report legitimately on real estate, it could begin to budge the LCI, which would be a help. But there are other challenges. SOQs, I don't think people realize that you as a board and the superintendent don't have much discretion really when you start building this budget. You start with the essentials that you have to provide. You use the funding that you know you'll get. And then the tough work happens. What do you do with what remains that's critical and important, and what's the top priorities? And then the last one will be funding excellence on the 14th of April. That one's going to say, look, if we really want an excellent school system, we're already a good school system. But if we want to be able to say we're one of the finest in the Commonwealth of Virginia, there's no reason why Rappahannock with its wealth shouldn't be able to say that. Then what would it take to create a true partnership between the school board, board of supervisors, and the community, the private sector, to create in the future a more reliable, steady stream? And I don't want to be misunderstood. This is not about increasing the contribution to the school budget that comes from county taxes. It might be about getting the supervisors and the school board together in a united front to take a more proactive stance towards Richmond, rather than being, this is all we've got, what do we make, how do we make do? So we're going to try and change the focus from how do we balance budgets to how do we fund a quality public education system. We may not be able to do that. But this looks like a good time to try. And if there's substantial private support for new, untried ways to make additional private dollars available to the school, I would never want to say, well, you didn't pursue that opportunity. So we're going to start out on this. We hope to have hundreds of people who are more involved than they ever have been before. We hope that those folks who tell us they're ready to step up and maybe make some significant gifts, I'll hold them accountable. I hope you'll help me hold them accountable. But maybe in a couple of months, we'll be able to say that moving forward to next year's budget cycle, we're going to have a more optimistic, a more positive outlook than trying to figure out how do we balance a school budget. So that's the plan. Thank you for your support. It will happen in this room, these 3 meetings. And we appreciate the graphic, your very own Holly Jenkins. We appreciate the support of the Rappahannock News and MedRap. and all the other partners in the county who are going to help us try and make this a success. But this is going to be different. This is not about scholarships. This is not about a one-off gift. This is really about changing the conversation, changing the attitude and the expectations of people in Rappahannock around the institution of public education. So that's our goal. So thank you all, and I hope we'll have more good news to tell you in the future.
So Headwaters has routinely, historically, helped with the education of public around London in the past. And so I'm hoping that this is a part of that.
Well,
And
my face is familiar, certainly to some of the supervisors, that I don't think there's been an issue in recent memory that involved support for the schools that somebody didn't get to hear me. So that's going to continue both personally, but Headwaters, part of our mandate is advocacy around school issues, but also advocacy in support of school budgets. Now that doesn't mean that if you ask for the moon and you don't deserve it, that Headwaters wouldn't independently review that before stepping up and endorsing it. I said several years ago, before I was on Headwaters, before I was on the town council in Washington, I'm not going to spend $1 until I'm sure the public schools are spending every dollar they get wisely. Fortunately, a superintendent showed up who began a process of budget construction. Budget became transparent and convinced me that if I did my homework and worked through every number in that school budget, I was hard-pressed to find any fat or wasted dollars. So starting with that beginning, I began to be a more involved, educated, and vocal advocate because I myself have always been involved in education all through my life, either teacher, student, son of a college professor, whatever you want. I'm convinced that education is the single least expensive way for the public to achieve good. Every kid you educate, especially in this county where we're doing whole education for whole life, think about the social benefits of $1 invested in a 4-year-old's preschool education. The research is abundant. We can spend billions on the tail end when things go south. I guess I can't say that here. When things go sideways. But you'd be an idiot not to realize that in the United States of America for a long time, $1 put into public education is probably the single best invested dollar the public has ever spent. So I have no trouble coming up with the rationale or the evidence or the research. The problem is when budgets are tight and you're competing with other important public ends, and you sort of think it's a zero-sum game, it's a single pie. So every time that on that chart, the school budget gets a little bit bigger, somebody else's slice gets a little bit smaller. And we all live here together. We all know everybody wants the public good. I'd like to find a way to make the pie bigger so that we don't have to have these really hard, difficult conversations about, well, who gets cut. So that's kind of where we're headed.
so this particular forum, just so we're clear before we jump to any conclusions, there's 3 sessions. They're going to happen here. They're all virtual, right?
There will be panelists, sort of like you guys, so we'll have some live bodies, and we'll fill the other remaining seats so that there are some live people here, kind of like tonight.
Okay, so there will be people here, and people that are online or people that are here are going to be, after the briefings are done, there's going to be briefings, and then there's going to be a Q&A time.
There'll be a presentation.
Yep.
There'll be a panel. Together that should take 30 to 40 minutes, and then we hope to have 20 minutes for each of those for questions or for comment.
Okay.
So some kind of public engagement.
Okay, just making sure.
Now, for anyone who's here, that would be easy. What our concern is, how do we connect people at home? Now, I know that the Board of Supervisors has figured that out. So the technology, at least at the courthouse and for the Board of Supervisors, exists so they can do that. Whether we can get that set up by next Thursday, I'm not sure. I'm not sure you guys have it here tonight that you could do a Zoom meeting where somebody at home could talk to you live. We're looking into that.
Well, we did that originally during COVID when we weren't allowed to be together.
Yeah, we're pursuing those technical questions. We hope to be able to get to that.
Are there any other questions before we move on?
I guess I'm a little confused. I see that Mr. Curry's going to be here for the first, and Dr. Grimsley for the first session. And I would assume would be the people who are answering questions if they come in from the public. In the second and third session, who's going to be the experts in that process?
Well, we hope the people on the panel have done some homework, and we hope the presenters have some background. Now, in terms of experts,
I don't understand that.
we're not really expecting this to be about experts. We're expecting this more to be about raising awareness of what
I
some...
understand, but if you have questions, then you're required to have, or not required to, but one would expect you to have answers for those questions.
Well, in the panel discussion too, it is structured in a way, and we've been collaborating on panelists that it makes sense for those certain meeting nights, but they will be composed to, get the discussion going, and then a short time afterwards for question and answer from the public if there are any. But I'll be present, and so will Headwaters too, in each of these. So.
These will be almost all community members who have, in some way in the last 10 years, paid attention and are, to the extent that anyone pays attention and comes to your meetings and listens to endless briefings and goes to supervisor meetings, they will be the ones who will be talking, and I would think that most of them could answer questions rather quickly about the things they've addressed. These aren't like experts in the sense that they don't hold any public office, they're not seeking any public office, they're just community members discussing with other community members issues that concern us. Now that might not be ideal, and obviously if there are technical questions that come up, we would have to get answers for those and make them available. This is more a lateral conversation. Giving people who are interested and don't quite know how to talk to anyone else about it, especially during COVID, how do we have this conversation? It is not so much a briefing from somebody who's an expert to somebody who isn't. Now, there are other ways to get this done, and I'm not saying this is the best way.
That's it.
Well, or the ability to defer.
Or defer the answer until you come back. Yeah.
A lot of times it takes research.
Well, a lot of this, we're looking for the right questions because we're not sure exactly what the whole answer is, and that's the point, is to really just engage in a community dialogue about here's what we're facing, here's the challenges, here's the possible structures that are barriers, so what do we think about that? What's your barriers? What are you thinking about? How are, we do have some expertise coming on the 14th, I don't know if I can put it out of bed, but if you don't mind. But yeah, Keith Sherrigan, for instance, our president of CoStars, is going to be coming in for that last one to say what he's been doing advocating for rural schools in Richmond and where we can help support. So it's conversations like that, just to make us aware of what's available, what's a good strategy, and it's not really about having the answers to tell anybody. We don't know what that is, but we want to engage in a community conversation about, okay, we're at a point where we should be talking about this together and coming up with a sustainable way to move forward without having to come back every year and just being like, okay, who's going to go this time? What program are we cutting now?
Right.
So those are the conversations to have. But we're not telling anybody what to do. There's just
Well,
about the educational components that we're dealing with.
We're sort of time pressed too, but we could certainly share with you, Ms. Grove, who some of the panelists are and what the panels are. And if you think there's somebody that you're aware of who's expert, who should be included in those conversations, we can either add them to a panel or we can make sure that they're invited and try and get them here that night.
That's a good point. It'd be good to see the panels. Once you get them.
We just sort of sent out the request, can you come and be with us? And
Right.
they're trickling in, and I'm pleased to say that I haven't had anybody reject the ones I've contacted. But yeah, we may not be able to change, we might be able to change the panelists, but even if we couldn't, we'll have about 5 or 10 seats available. And if we can get somebody that any of you think would be an important person, by all means, we would want to try and include them.
I would just think it would be important to have panelists who were not from inside of Rappahannock County, but who could creatively solve some of the problems similar to what we're dealing with. So I think Keith Berger would be one good person, but thinking about our demographic and the populations that are high in Rappahannock, it does make sense to look, and it not just sort of talk inside of our community, but to look outside as well. I'm glad to hear that we'll have people from outside as well coming. And maybe we can look at.
I don't think we've had a confirmation yet, so I can't use a name, but we have a person who spent years doing hard statistical analysis of a lot of the numbers that go into the LCI, who we hope is going to be on a panel. And he may be outside of somebody who actually gets paid by the state in Richmond to do the number, as up to speed on that as anybody would be. So we have made an effort to try to have informed comment, but not necessarily published experts.
You know what, it's also going to be good, by the way, to record these sessions, because it seems to me every couple of years we have to go through the same re-education process about, okay, what is the LCI, what are you talking about? And if it's just on a YouTube, you know, we can put a link to it somewhere on the page. What is LCI? And they can hit the link and go listen to the 5-minute dissertation about it. So it could have a long-term benefit that will keep us from having to repeat the same information.
One of the things that motivated me to try this is I've been coming to these meetings and to budget meetings now for several years, and the presentations are full and rich. And after 4 or 5 years of budget hearings, I begin to understand what's going on. But then I talk to somebody who's a neighbor, who is really a decent person, really supports public education, and you start to have a conversation, and they go, I have no idea what you're talking about. So
That happened to me this week. That very same thing.
I hope it's not the same person. Anyway, this is an attempt, and it may work, but it seems like something Headwaters could do to try and promote a conversation that's broader than just how do we pay for school.
Right.
Anyway,
All right, anything else? All right.
thank you again.
Thank you very much. Look forward to seeing that mature. All right, buckle up.
Okay. Fresh off the press, literally a couple of hours ago, our new calculation tool from the General Assembly conference budget was finally published that we could.
So, Ms. Witt and myself have been working throughout the weekend into the wee hours of the early morning this morning. Last night trying to finalize some numbers, and then we had to redo some after that came up. So just really quickly before Stacy gives you some of the highlights of what she's been able to accomplish with this budget, the conference budget, the major piece that we were watching was the compensation percentage for the increases, and the 5% was the one that ended up going through. So initially, remember, we were planning on the 2% increase as the governor had proposed. So that then the House bill moved through, and that looked like the 5% was gaining a lot of traction, which it did, and that ended up being what the conference budget went with. So our new budget is based on the 5% increase.
And that's for everyone.
Yes. So Stacy, if you'd like to come up and just go through the quick highlights, and then I'll take them through the big report.
As you all know, this is my favorite time of year. So, as Shane said, we worked late last night, and then right before we came in, we got numbers again, so we reworked some things. But that's budget season, and that's what we're here for. So, just to go over some of the highlights that we are working with in this budget. I know in our previous meetings, we had discussed our teacher scale, and we saw some comparisons. And we weren't exactly where we wanted to be with our beginning teachers, our 10-year teachers. So we worked on a compression. So we did a teacher scale compression for steps 0 to 15 in this budget. And then we also did a 5% increase for all staff. With those two things, we are looking at $446,322 for those two items. That number does include, we know some teachers are retiring, so we were able to put a mid-year teacher in their place instead of the end of scale. So that number does include those few things. Again, this year, we received a 0% increase on our insurance before they tacked on the 4% decrease that the entire TLC group received. So I'm not sure, I think that's year 5 or 6 for us. That was, yes. So our insurance is doing well.
Did you read that right? It said decrease?
Yes, decrease. So they gave, every TLC member received a 4% decrease across the state. But before they attach the decrease, they look at your rates and decide whether you're going to get an increase or not. And then put the 4% on it. So we came in at a 0% and then had the 4% deduction attached. So that worked out to about $75,812 for us. Next, we are receiving SR2 funds next year for some of our COVID-related items. I believe it's $503,000 roughly. So SR2, do you know?
Okay, elementary school, secondary school emergency relief funds.
That's a federal fund?
Yes, those are federal funds.
Here's to roll down, basically.
Yes.
COVID relief.
So we are covering some of our expenses that are in the budget usually with these funds, but we've also added additional funds in there that we plan on covering. Hotspots for those who will be virtual learning next year, additional PPE and sanitation. We're upgrading one of our HVAC systems in the high school, additional summer schooling, custodial staff, teaching staff as needed to help those who have been struggling this year. And then we are also able to cover the purchase of a school bus with this. So we are using those funds for that. Additional changes that we made in the budget this year, we have a textbook adoption at the elementary school, so we needed to increase our line there. We added additional funding for the Ag and Health Science Academies next year. Those two programs have been a huge hit for us this year, and we needed to increase their material items there. Our electricity bill is seeing a decrease over the last 12 months, so we were able to decrease there. And then we have the additional SR2 expenses that were included. So a summary of our highlights. Here's a list of our expenses and what they added up to over instruction, admin, attendance, health, transportation, operations and maintenance, and technology. So our total expense line was an increase of $644,359. Our revenue changed at the very last minute today. So state, we were originally thinking we were going to get a $40,000 deduction, and at about 3 o'clock today, we found out that we were getting an additional $30,000 that we did not know about. So our state revenue change is a decrease of $8,600. Again, we had federal revenue that increased this year for us, mainly being the SR2 funds. And then we had a change in grant funding from the previous year. So our total revenue change is an increase of $412,836. So that's the highlights of the budget. Any questions?
Sorry, the revenue, the change in state revenue is a negative.
No, it's still a positive.
Oh, it's a positive.
Yeah,
Oh, okay. So
because
you're
of the
all
federal grant.
Great. But state is
Yeah.
a decrease, right? State is a general listing. The other two are increased. The other two, the federal is an increase and the grant funding is a. Yes, and I can explain why that it's a decrease. Yes, that's a decrease. Okay.
Any questions?
Questions for the numbers wizard? It's amazing how quickly she can throw out those charts. Thank you, Stacy. All right, so now the budget report is up and available. I'll tell you my funny story how I've been working on it since November and it completely went away on me on Thursday. Oh, and I had to redo everything. That's lovely. Backed up twice too. It's crazy. Reduced to a. I will email myself everything from now on.
Yes.
So anyway, the budget report has a formal, same as the former reports, similar format. So it goes through our goals, which really haven't changed. Even though we're dealing with a pandemic, we still are staying the course. We are still using the conceptual framework for the profile of a Virginia graduate and making sure we have all these experiences to ensure that we have life-ready students by the time their experience is completed here. And then a quick letter from me just about thanking everybody for everything that they've done this year. It's been an incredible community effort. It really has. Everybody really stepped up to the challenge to educate students, but not only that, provide services to families, feed everybody, work together to find ways that we could support one another. So it was actually a beautiful thing to see in that sense. We still have a lot of challenges, which is why the superintendent priorities in this budget, number one is the amelioration of COVID-19 impacts. You heard our student liaison speak to some of those already, and it's affecting everybody. So not just students who typically struggle in school, but those who are very successful normally are still struggling. So that remains a priority to make sure we're dealing with those critical needs that COVID has resulted in. Teacher staff raises has always been a discussion point, and that came up again in our joint meeting. We'll talk a little bit more about that coming up. High school academies, we piloted that this year, even despite COVID. We said, no, we really do want to roll with this. It definitely fits our mission of what we're doing. We have community partnerships. We have the right people. Let's see what happens. And sure enough, they took off, and we are capping out in every class in those academies. So that it deserves to be funded. The students want it. We have great community partnerships. Like I said, RAPC is on board for the Health Science Academy. So yes, everything's going really great there. And then, of course, equity, making sure that we maintain equity to access for all of our programs. But as always, this isn't everything. This report isn't going to have everything that we need, but it hopefully will walk through the process and share what we've dealt with this year and what we're thinking about. All right, and I'm not going to go through everything. Performance highlights are there. We didn't have SOL testing for last year, so because of COVID. This year we will be SOL testing in certain areas. The federal government has not waived those for federal accountability. The state has waived accreditation accountability, however, so it's more about growth assessments. Here's our enrollment summary, which I actually need to update today. As I saw, we have additional students in the elementary school coming in and added about 20 students since we started out. So actual pre-K enrollment is up 20 and approaching 500, which is awesome. Great. And then the description of the LCI, Local Composite Index, how that affects us, what's the difference between, and how does ADM interact with that? That's the average daily membership. So that's in this report as well. The same as the last few years. It's that formula really hasn't changed in its makeup, just its percentage sometimes. Here's our trend with enrollment and average daily membership. So as you can see, we have had a decrease in enrollment in ADM, and we're accounting for that too. So SOQs are the standards of quality that the budget is built on, and as you've heard before, that we start here. This is what the state mandates you have to have. Your standards of quality and standards of accreditation really outline what every public school needs to have. And then the state funnels in aid through basic aid or direct aid through the LCI formula. So for instance, if you look at this chart, here's an example through our funding tool. So you're going to be funded for 1.86 kindergarten teachers. Well, I need 3 to make sure we meet the guidelines. So they're only going to cover that much through the SOQ formula. That's what they're going to fund, and then it gets filtered through LCI. So you're really getting funded at 20% of a portion of your SOQ mandate. I was happy to see in the conference budget, now we do receive state funding for up to 3 support positions per 1,000. So ours will be like 2.23 or something. But still, that's funding we can now receive for our school nurses, our social workers, psychologists, and those pieces that they've seen that have been so critical to schools. So we will see that this year. Federal grants, we do receive title funding for different programs. So Title I, for instance, for at-risk reading and math assistance. Those funds actually support our reading specialist and portions of other support staff that help with those students. And then the different title programs are there and what they do. And then, of course, IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, that's your special ed flow-through funds and preschool funds. Carl D. Perkins are your CTE funds that support your career and technical education. And then there's a link there to all the federal programs if you're so interested. Federal programs are fun. Federal and state relief grants. This is a new section this year because previously in the budget cycles we haven't had this before. The Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, CARES Act, was the stimulus passed last year when the pandemic hit. Initially, the school has received $143,000 in this fiscal year in order to respond to the pandemic. In fact, we are still working toward reimbursing this into this fiscal year and supporting some summer school costs with that as well. We haven't even spent it all because the county funds came in early on at the end of FY20 and into FY21 throughout the summer to make sure we could reopen our schools successfully. And that was about $526,000 that the county gave to us in order to be able to support the schools. So we're very, very thankful for that. We could not have done it successfully without that. And in fact, a lot of the education associations that you've seen across the state and the nation, in fact, if you look at their pillars for concern and how to return teachers to safety, some of it, not even half of what we've done for our teachers and our staff and students to make sure that they were safe coming back. So we're thrilled we were able to do that. CARES, ESSER, and GEAR funds. So ESSER was Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief. Oh, I was right. And the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Funds. Those were available through separate set-aside application grants. So, of course, we applied. We applied for anything that we might be able to get our hands on that's there. And we did receive $29,873 to offset some additional expenditures with facilities and maintenance and technology like custodial services for deep cleaning, mobile hotspots for families with limited internet access, things like that. And then we received CARES CRF set-aside funds, which was the governor's funds that he had set aside that they allocated as a direct payment to school divisions. And that's how we were able to, remember, mid-year or so, mid-first semester, get our UV decontamination systems and air scrubbers in all the classrooms before flu season hit, which was wonderful. So that came in to do that. And then as Stacy mentioned, Sr2 funds are coming out. That's the latest iteration. And that will be $503,000 that we can use throughout fiscal year 22 and 23. And to support reopening, learning loss, infrastructure, network, anything that you need to help your students be successful. It's a lot more flexible than the previous one. So that's how we're really looking at ways to offset certain expenditures that had to be repurposed for COVID relief. So having another bus, for instance, to double up on a route where we know we're going to have additional students coming in through the phase-in and at the beginning of next year. So that's what we're looking at for that, and that will take care of a major project we had planned in our capital improvement plan as well, which was the BRF system in the main hallway up here. All right, so what's new? We have new grants all the time that we're continuing to write. Our Virginia College Advising Corps grant will continue, so we will definitely have a college advisor for the foreseeable future. Commit to be Fit, of course, is funded indefinitely. Preschool Services, now this is where we talked about why did our grants go down. Our grants in this area went down a little bit, but that's because we're taking a different approach and actually joining on a regional mixed delivery program and preschool delivery. So the funding will still come in for our families, it just won't need to pass through the schools anymore. The fiscal agent is going to be a more regional, so we won't need to have to be a pass-through. So that's what those funds really were anyway. They didn't directly support us, but of course indirectly through educating our early education programs. So we are still part of the mixed delivery and preschool development family. We're just doing it in a different way. And so that's where we just no longer met the criteria, because now as they explored the mixed delivery options and private-public partnerships, they found that they basically upped the enrollment numbers. So anytime they do that, we can't apply. So Lisa Payne Wells at CCLC and myself reached out to the Rockingham branch of the preschool development, and they're happy to have us. So we will join on forces with them and then receive that direct aid that way. Also, there are plans for early Head Start to come back to Rappahannock, and hopefully that's moving forward well. That's through CCLC and People Inc. Then, of course, our academies, I talked about that. We have additional funding in our budget to support the Health Science Academy, which right now we partner with RAPC to provide the instructor. So basically what we're paying here is for instructor and course fees and certain materials and certification fees. And then the same for the Ag Academy. This one, we have our own instructor who's multi-endorsed to teach classes at the schools, but we also have very heavy certification costs in the Ag Academy. The equipment and lab work and the certification testing and the amount that you can get in a single cluster is pretty intense, which is great. That's going to give our kids a lot of experience and a lot of stackable credentials when they're out, but it does cost some money. So what we did was we put $20,000 into each academy, so that's called out in the budget, and that should support what we need moving forward. The Wellness Center, so we received this year a grant from the Path Foundation, the amount of $69,000 to look at the feasibility of starting a school-based wellness center here, and you've heard updates throughout the process. So where we are now is that Susan Stoltzman, our project coordinator, has already begun with Health Connect America, and now we have outpatient mental health services available to students who are referred who need that in both the elementary and the high school. So that is all billed directly to families, health insurance or Medicaid. And we have some grant funding that can provide gap funding as well if it's needed. With the physical health services, Valley Health has agreed to partner with us. And you heard before that we were talking about the telehealth options. That is kind of taking off into another discussion about something even better, which might be a regional approach to telehealth medicine in regional schools. So it's really exciting, actually. So we'll be in conversation about that to see how that will move forward. If any physical health happens with telehealth, that'll be rolled out in the fall of 2021. So we have a little time before that happens. But in all of these, it's all grant-funded project or sustained through direct billing to insurance or Medicaid, so no county funds or school funds are spent on this project, which I think is important to note. And then you have your review of previous budget cycles, what the county contribution was in those certain budget years. And this is the amount we will be proposing to ask for in this budget. So to make all those ends meet with everything we talked about, we still are short, and we'll ask the county for $231,523. But when you saw those costs, those $644, we were able to get it down quite a bit using revenue sources and making adjustments. This is just a trend graph without any adjustments for inflation and things, but as you can see, the funding that we've asked for from the county has been rather flat and in fact has come down. We've had enrollment decrease, yes, but we've had that conversation before. We've seen a decrease in federal funds, except this little uptick in the last year because of COVID, but we have seen quite a loss in our federal funds over the years, and the state just still doesn't pick up nearly what they mandate we need to have. So that's part of the struggle. And then the budget report details each category and where our funding comes from, where it's placed. Instruction remains the bulk of the budget, as it should be, and that supports the education of students. And then all the other pieces that you need to have. Each category has a chart to show you how it's broken out, and then exactly how much money is projected in there. And that's for each of the sections. And then I'm going to jump down here to the summary charts. That's where we came up with our total amount proposed in the budget. And here's the adjustments we needed to make. So here's your total cost, and then when you put in the change in revenue from the state and federal and grants, then you end up with a the amount that we still need at the 231,523. Notable adjustments. So let's talk about the compensation because this is really important and I think it's pretty great that we've finally been able to do this. And we've been in a situation previously where I know there was a vast salary scale study done many years ago. I think it was, 2009, 2010, about that time frame, where the vast salary scale study came in and looked at comparisons surrounding counties and did a pretty extensive salary scale study and found that the teacher's salary scale really was detrimental to those at the higher end, and we had so many staff that were approaching that area that they thought some work needed to be done there. So benchmarking to the median on our rankings, you can see that's where we made more headway in our teacher scale, is more toward the end of the scale. We're in a particular situation this time where we have more than the average number of teachers retiring, which is going to present a recruitment issue, but even more so because of COVID-19, and now that we can't go out and actively seek at these recruitment fairs. So we do have to do what we can to be more competitive. We're hopeful that all the attention this school system has gotten this year will be hopefully bringing people to us, but we have to take a more proactive role. So there was talk at the joint meeting. I love this conversation about, okay, well, you keep saying this, let's do something about it. I'm like, yes, sir, let's do something about this. We need to. So we did a scale compression and looked at a lot of other districts too that have done something similar. We compressed years 0 to 5, 5 to 10, and 10 to 15, making the 0 year closer to a 5 year. There's still a smaller step in between, but it's much more competitive at that end. So here's the new scale after the compression. So as you can see, this is a much better place for a bachelor's 0 teacher to start in Rappahannock, whereas before we were at 41, I think.
41, yeah, oh, wow.
Yeah, so that's a nice big jump. They won't see as much between years 0 and 5, and then they'll see a jump there. 5 to 10, same thing, but we compressed it, so you'll have more money up front and you won't make as much later on. And then, of course, the 5% was included in that, too, with the compression. So on average, our teachers who are in those years probably, I think, made out between a 7 and a 9% on average, whereas everyone at the end got at least the 5 on this scale in particular. We needed to do some work there, and we are definitely going to need to recruit. So that's our new scale. And this table is just kind of the history of where we've been based on mandates. As you can see, most of the increases we've done have been by mandate. I talked a little bit about the staff benefits here. Stacy already told you we have no increase to health insurance 5 years in a row. When the state superintendent was visiting us a couple Fridays ago, he said, I know of no other who has ever done that. He said, how are you doing that? So we got to talk about Commit to be Fit and health and wellness and what we're doing with our new wellness portal and the action-based learning lab and nutrition and all these things that are so important, and they've actually saved so much. I think that's just about $1 million over the course of the 5 years in possible health insurance increases. So it is worth it to really focus on health and wellness. And then there's no VRS increase, so that remains the same. And then, of course, we saw the 4% credit. So all the rates remain the same for the employees. So they are very happy about that. And we're in talks right now. You heard Pierce Group at the last meeting. And we are in talks about incentivizing higher deductible plans and possibly putting a credit from the employer contribution into a health savings account, an HSA, pre-taxed dollars that can roll over. We already have access to an FSA, flexible spending account, which our employees are using and really liking, but to have more people move over to the higher deductible, if they feel they can, with the HSA as a safety net and an employer contribution that may be lesser than the actual single subscriber, but a credit to them. It could make out better and be more sustainable for our health insurance too. But so far, doing great. We haven't really had an issue with that. I'd love to be one of the few school systems that can say that. So thank you, Commit to be Fit. We love this program. So far, $1.5 million invested in this through Path Foundation. So it's worthwhile, it's working. We have some exciting things that we're going to be looking at in the Action-Based Learning Lab next year, particularly with a correlation between the movement foundations and reading and literacy. And if we can show that we actually can mitigate the gap in the movement foundations in the Action-Based Learning Lab and tie that to reading progress, it's going to be really groundbreaking. I'm pretty excited. Not to write another dissertation, but it's pretty exciting. Our transportation schedule is there. This year we actually did substitute our single bus for 2 activity buses. That actually made it more possible to transport some smaller groups of students during our COVID experiences. And then next year, of course, the Sr2 Funds will cover our full bus. And then, facilities. This is so exciting. Okay, so in the past 4 years, we have had an excellent collaboration with the school board supervisors and Mr. Curry to really take a hard look at our capital improvement projects and do some really serious long-term planning, because it is costly. Capital will break a budget if you're not careful. So we were able to work on this 5-year capital improvement plan. We combined funding streams with the RCPS facilities budget, and Mr. Curry introduced the county PAYGO dollars that could be used and drawn down for certain projects. And with that, and then added to the CARES Act coming in and county CARES dollars like these wonderful seats you have here, all these projects were able to be taken care of this year. So I have this capital improvement project period. So there's a summary of all of that. And a lot of this was in Robin's, Dr. Bolt's presentation last time. And then you can see the funding sources here. So it's a nice collaboration. You can see that we were able to complete all those projects. Now, coming in, and this is important to our next cycle, there's quite a cost to some of this. But because we were so careful and collaborative in our accounting and working with these additional federal funds, we were able to make so much progress that in the next cycle, this is now the anticipated funding source that can be able to fund our capital projects, which means it's all RCPS operational infrastructure funding, as long as that VDOE CIP funds still come through, and that's your infrastructure operations, the direct aid. And we don't see anything that suggests that that's going to go away. In fact, it looks like it might be increased over the next few years to support schools. So we're excited about that. So that means after analyzing our next cycle for our 5-year period, we don't anticipate asking for any county dollars to complete our projects. We can do it within our own budget that we're getting. So that's significant to the county, because that is money they can then absorb for other priorities or help us with our shortfall. Look how beautiful the schools are. Okay, and then that's really the whole thing. That's where we are. So acknowledgements, of course. I always like to thank our wonderful school board members for all that you do. And this time I could not help but put the supervisors in here and Mr. Curry for all the collaboration over the pandemic. It truly has brought us all closer. We've had to work together to find really creative solutions. So that's the budget I am proposing. Are there any questions?
So this is basically everything that we've already gone over for the past month, and the difference being the General Assembly threw the 5% curveball at us that we're absorbing and basically pushing forward, right, at a cost of $230,000 that we were not intending, but we're being told.
Great.
Well, it is, and it's good for people to know, and as they get educated more about the LCI, they'll see an SOQ. What they'll see is, and just in general, 15%, whatever they believe that the raise is that they want the entire staff to have, they're going to fund 15% of it, and the rest of it is on the backs of the local taxpayer. It comes out of our county budget. So it's just good to know.
It's more like 10%.
Well, it's 80% of 20%, which is about 16, right? 15 to 16%. So in dollars of $250,000, that's about $40K
Right.
And the rest of it, we got to cover ourselves. Just approximations. But it's good for us to know that when something's voted for in Richmond, that they're not planning on paying for that.
No.
Right? They're planning on us paying for that. And it's just good for us to be mindful of it as citizens. That
And on top of that, it's mandated.
and it's mandated, right?
Mandated, yeah.
But the mandate is because Virginia's teachers aren't really paid an equitable amount compared to teachers in other states.
Right, I saw that stat.
So it wouldn't behoove us to not go with a mandate or to buck that. I mean, I think that we're still going to be lower than the average teacher pay, even with this. I mean, we need to pay for it. I mean, that's something that we need to get teachers into our into our school. We need to retain people.
Well, and if there's ever any year to do it, what the staff has pulled off this year.
Exactly.
Oh, I get goosebumps just thinking. It's just incredible how they all really pulled together and how much work it took. And I hear from other districts all the time about, well, how many remote learning teachers do you have that are just doing that? How many do, I'm like, my staff's doing it all, okay? We don't have those separate, we wouldn't be able to staff it accordingly if we had to do that. And so our staff is doing all of that, doing the hybrid learning model, making sure they're taking care of remote learners. It's a lot. And, you know, even to survive this year is saying quite a bit, but I think they've done an outstanding job.
And a lot of that comes from collaboration
Absolutely.
and leadership. So yeah, that's where it comes from. I believe.
All right. Well, thanks for putting that together and walking through it with us again. Very educational and transparent. Very helpful information. I appreciate it. Is there any questions from the board before we move on? We're going to give the public an opportunity to this is basically our hearing for the school budget. There's another hearing a month from now where the supervisors entertain a similar conversation on the school budget and on the overall budget too, I believe. But that'll be a month from now. So is there anything else from the board before we move on? Anyone? Any questions?
Well, I just appreciate seeing the newly compressed.
Scale.
Thank you for putting that and for giving us all these. I mean, it's a lot of numbers, but it's kind of exciting to see this. Thank you for putting that
And these
in detail in this document.
These are available, right? We have
Yes.
these out in the hallway.
They are, and they are loaded on board docs.
The one-board docs, and we'll make sure that, usually we make sure they're in different places in the county, right? And those would be found at the library and where else?
Yep, as soon as you adopt it, we will put it out to different areas, yes.
Right.
So as long as this is what we're going forward with.
And we do have that option to do that now or anytime before the end of the month, basically. Because I guess at this point, the General Assembly is not going to add anything else that we know of.
better not.
No, they're not. It'll
They're
go to the,
They're finished.
Let's hope
It
they
goes
don't
to
take
the
anything
governor.
The
away.
session is almost over.
yeah, that, it's been the longest ongoing session that opened up last March. It's still just the
They can
but-
add all they want.
They can, but no, this one is completed. It'll go to the governor, and hopefully everything will be wrapped up. I think April 7th is the date that we find out about what might happen with that.
Did you say April 7th?
April 7th.
Right, so
By that time, we're done anyway.
we
so-
have to be done
Yeah.
before the end of March. So
Yep.
if they do change things at that point, then the supervisors will adjust accordingly.
We will reconcile with whatever,
Right,
yes.
right.
Absolutely.
All right. Any other questions from the board? All right. At this time, we'll open up the floor for public hearing. The public comment will be directly related to budget topics. If you have something that's not budget, there's also a public comment time later on in the agenda that you can discuss those things. Is there anybody that would like to address the board this evening on the budget? Yes, ma'am. Can you come?
All of you for such an amazing job. When budgets are changed at the national level, at the state level, and you come forward with a very reasonable budget with very little added for the county, I'm very excited to see how well this school board is working and how well our schools are working. So I want to compliment our superintendent and each of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Oh, can you share your name and district with us?
Oh, Eve Brooks,
Eve.
and I live in Sperryville.
All right, Piedmont district. Thank you very much. Anyone else this evening? And Gary, are you coming up?
Yeah.
He's coming back.
Yeah.
I almost didn't. You guys have worked so hard. One of the things that always frustrates me is this represents hours and hours and hours of work. And by law, you're required to have a public hearing. And the superintendent just went through again an incredible presentation, every page loaded with hard work. And there's not many of us, and not everyone talks as much as I do, but we sit there, and I would never want anyone to have the impression that we don't appreciate all your work, that this isn't a monumental effort, that it's well done. And so that's all I want to say, is that it should be on the record that as a school board, as a school administration, you take your responsibility seriously, you do your work. It's not easy, you don't often get a whole lot of credit. And at this time of year especially, when it's so tough, and you're waiting almost like for a report from the front on what's happening, to have this report ready, to have it presented this way, this fully, in this format, is really quite remarkable. When you think about, we live in a county with, what, 7,200 people. We're not a mammoth school division that has thousands of staffers. It's a very small team that gets an awful lot of very good work done. So I just want to express my personal appreciation, but on behalf of county residents that aren't here tonight and don't have a mic, I know many of us really, really appreciate your effort, and I think this is a great budget. I wish there wasn't a shortfall, but it is what it is, and we had hoped that we wouldn't be mistreated quite the way we were with one piece of legislation. We didn't know the governor was going to mandate 5%, and so both of those things are well beyond anything anyone in this county can do. So how you respond to that, how you deal with that crisis, is really a mark of the quality of the staff and the leadership and your leadership as the board. So thank you again for all your hard work.
Very, we are very fortunate that a really good time in the history of our school in this county. So we do need to remember to be grateful for it. Anyone else? All right, we're going to move on. We're moving on. Is there a report from the Headwaters Representative tonight?
I do have a report today. A number of things. Headwaters is busy. The first item is the after-school enrichment program is registering now, and it plans to start on March 16th. There will be increased staff in 4 groups, and it will include guest speakers for the students, which is a new thing, a new feature of the after-school program. The RAC and Headwaters Collaboration Drama Club has been going on Saturdays. There are 13 kids involved. There are teen helpers, both from our school and from other schools, and some of the participants most are RCPS, but it is anybody in the county could participate. It'll be meeting for 6 weeks, and then there will be a little presentation for family and friends in the middle of March. And RAC is also looking at being involved with summer enrichment activities as well in a collaboration with Headwaters. So this was the beginning of a good collaboration, it sounds like. Starfish has news under Brittany Dwyer's direction. There are 7 new mentors who have been vetted.
That's great.
Yeah, trained, and they're ready to be placed with children. That's a lot. That's the most that I've ever seen.
And it's a high impact. That's a high impact, much needed.
Yeah, and now that we have our social worker on hand, she's ready with Kathy Sickler, Candy Lama, to identify some students who can use that valuable mentorship. And it's exciting to have the program revitalized and gaining
Yeah.
mentors. Headwaters has funded another graduate to enroll in the heavy equipment operators class. This will be the 5th, I think, enrollee in this heavy equipment certification through Lord Fairfax Community College. It's something that they did as a pilot, and now it seems like an ongoing program that we'll need to find maybe a funder who cares about that particular. And Mr. Achel has already spoken about the ongoing. I'm just going to add the dates into the record. They'll each be at 7 p.m., March 18th, March 31st, and April 14th, are the days that I had on that. And the conversation will begin and continue.
Very good. Thank you very much for that, Rachel. MVGS?
Yeah, we did meet, and we just basically confirmed that students will have an opportunity to meet in person for labs, 2 labs a week, and then alternate weeks, and 2 labs the next week, and that kind of thing. So all through the chemistry and all the labs will have hands-on labs from now to the end of the year.
Oh, good. Now, good.
That took a great deal of transportation issue, I understand, just to make sure who was going where and when. Yeah, but they got it done.
Oh, good. That's a good change. Thanks. All right, moving on to discussion. Now's our opportunity. If we have any questions regarding the presentation we got tonight, any questions, changes, anything that we would touch about it. The matter is, before us is, we do have currently a budget work session available to us on the 23rd of March if we needed it. The question is there anything that we would research and change between now and then, which is possible, and if not, this board could choose to go ahead and make a motion to pass this budget tonight. Now, their benefit to that, of course, is it starts the engines rolling with everybody's ability to start crunching the numbers a little, on Gary's behalf and that type of thing too. So it gives him a little more time to work. And it gives time for everybody to start asking more questions if they want, because something is now fixed. So it would, if we did that tonight, obviously there would be no need for a work session on the 23rd. So any discussion tonight on any of the things?
I think it's been thoroughly, completely done. I don't see how it got done so quickly, but weekends and so forth. And in my way of thinking, we're about ready to go.
I agree.
Yeah, it seems thorough to me as well.
And my only
I couldn't think of anything to add or take away.
Right, and it was basically, it's needs-based. We've evaluated where we wanted to put our energy and made those increases based on demands to the system. And I think the only thing that scares me a little bit is anytime you reduce like electricity, I'm like, oh, that's going to catch me. So I know it's a little scary. We've done it before with fuel because fuel costs are going down. Well, now they're going back up. And are we ready? Are we ready? Are we ready? Are we ready? And what's going to bite us?
Hopefully we got full tanks last week.
Right. So that's the only fear I have, is if we were trying to be too conservative and we get bit in 2021, 2022 budget. So.
Well, that's more based on a trend, not just a single year either. Right, so we feel comfortable with the reduction we've made. So should be okay.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. And we did mention, you mentioned electricity. I know we've had a lot of ideas thinking about solar in the future, and I would like to just put out there, not in this budget, I don't think we're ready for it, but we should keep our eyes peeled for opportunities of funding towards solar or other renewable sources of energy. It is a line item that we could reduce by investing in the future.
The thing that I like most is that it follows our mission, follows our statement, our whole program of studies. The budget just is reflected in all of those things. And that's the way it should be.
All right. Is there a motion to adopt a bottom line this evening?
Is this what you want?
That's a motion.
Yes.
If you're willing to.
I make a motion to accept the proposed budget of $13,589,585 to be submitted to the Board of Supervisors on, you want March 31st, 2020?
Well, we can say by March 31st, but we're going to do it,
We'll
we'll
send
be
it
doing
over
it,
to
yeah, this week. It'll be over there this week.
Yeah.
Second.
So we're going to say by March 31st,
By March 30th.
and we'll get it there as soon as we can. All right, so that's the motion. We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second from Mr. Grove. Is there any other discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, no. And so ordered. And we will not be meeting at the prescribed work session on the 23rd. I think the next time we're together is April 5th.
Or 7?
What's that Monday? We were scheduled to be with the supervisors.
On the 6th or 7th or something.
It's the 5th.
The 5th of April at 7 o'clock. I would imagine here.
The gym
I'll
at
have it at the elementary.
Oh, it's at the elementary school. Let's make sure we're clear about that, because I started out my evening at the elementary school.
Me too.
So, you too, yeah. So at the elementary school, April the 5th, 7 o'clock, we'll be together to respond, basically, if there are any questions regarding school budget at that time. All right. The VSBA Business Honor Roll, item 7.3. The last month, the idea was put forth that we present this resolution to VSBA for
Rose
Hill. And so that's what this is. And so this evening we'll have this motion and get it signed and forwarded to VSBA, and they'll produce something that, so it takes months to get this done, right? But we'll send it to VSBA. They'll produce the frameable document that we'll present to Rose Hill either next month or the following month. Depends on how long it takes. So that's what that is. Now, on to, are there any questions about that? We good? Moving on to public comment. Is there anyone that would like to address the board on anything this evening? Anyone? Okay, so we have adopted the budget. That's item 9.1. Modification of the budget calendar. I guess we don't need to modify it. We just are not going to be meeting for the work session. That's not a modification, is it? We're just not showing up.
It's on the calendar, so we'll put something out just to be sure people know that it's been canceled.
Is there a motion to approve the VSBA honor roll resolution?
So moved.
Motion, Mr. Grove, second. Ms. Bynum, all in favor, be saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, no. So ordered. Is there any new business today? No? Our next meeting actually is on the 5th of April. The school board meeting, I have to look up the date every time. 13th, the 13th of April at 6:30. I would assume we're back at the elementary school again. At this time, we're going to have a motion to go into closed session.
I move the board convene to closed session for the following purpose: to discuss and consider the appointment of staff for a professional position, coaching positions pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A1.
We have a motion for Mr. Grove. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Ms. Bynum. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Okay, we're going to be going across the hall to a room. We're going to be there for how many minutes? 5 minutes, and then we'll be back and address the personnel docket and then adjourn, if you care to wait. We're going to certify.
Larry Grove certifies.
Lucy Ann Myers certifies.
Wesley Mills certifies.
And I have this to read pursuant to VA Code 2.2-3119E1. I certify that I had no involvement in the hiring decision of the JP Boys and Girls Volunteer Soccer Assistant Coach.
So in case you're wondering, it's because Eric, her husband, is
He's going to help with
is our
soccer.
coach. And fortunately, you know, we have laws that accommodate such things. So that's what's happening there. So we've all certified that only those things discussed in closed session were part of the motions will be discussed. So at this time, is there a motion to adopt the personnel report that was presented this evening?
So moved.
We have a motion from Ms. Myers. Is there a second?
Second.
I don't think you can.
I can't second.
She can't.
Oh, I second
I
it.
do.
Mr. Grove's going to second. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, no. And so ordered. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Hold on, before
Yes,
you do that.
Oh, you have to say something.
I have to follow up with
Okay.
that, just to put down for the record pursuant to Virginia Code 2.2-3119E2, the employment of the JP Boys Girls Volunteer Soccer Assistant Coach is based upon merit and fitness and the competitive rating of the qualifications of the individual, and no member of the board had any involvement with that hiring decision.
That's true.
For sure.
Thank you very much. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We have a motion, Mr. Groves, or second?
Second.
Second from Ms. Meyer. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, no. We're adjourned. Thank you very much.
My knee thanks you.